Chapter 4. The Road to Islam. Like much of Asia, Arabia was a noisy place when it came to religion and beliefs. There were many competing ideas about the divine, ranging from theories involving multiple gods to the single god religions of Judaism and Christianity, both of which had won significant support among the inhabitants of Arabia by the year 600 AD. It was in this region, as war raged to the north, that a trader named Muhammad retreated to a cave not far from the city of Mecca to contemplate. According to the Islamic tradition, in 610 AD, Muhammad began to receive a series of revelations from God. He heard a voice commanding him to recite verses in the name of your Lord, and over the coming years, he received a series of recitations that were first written down a few decades later in a single text known as the Quran. The voice repeatedly told Muhammad that God is compassionate and merciful, but also severe in punishing those who refuse to obey him. At a time when trade across Arabia and the Red Sea had been disrupted by an almost constant state of war, Muhammad's messages fell on a fertile ground. The promise of fields bursting with fruit and grain was tempting, as was the idea of paradise, where gardens were fed by fresh and pure water, with rivers of wine delectable to those who drink it. On the other hand, those that rejected the divine doctrines would not just face doom and disaster, but damnation too. Anyone who waged war on Muhammad's followers was seen to be attacking God and deserved to be crucified, lose limbs, or be exiled, finally suffering never-ending torture in hell. These teachings provoked a strong reaction in the town of Mecca, and Muhammad fled in 622 AD, in what eventually became known as the Hijrah, or departure. Nevertheless, supporters rallied round him, drawn in by the spiritual reward of salvation and the call for unity. While many religions involved arguments between leading scholars, Islam sought to dismiss any division. Much was made of in the Quran of the community of believers, the Ummah, that they should stay united, along with warnings that the division was the work of Satan. The fact that Muhammad's message was preached in the local language was also important. "Behold," says one of the verses of the Quran in Arabic, "here are the words from above." Muhammad presented the Arabs with their own religion, one that created a new identity. This was a faith designed for local populations, whether they were tribespeople or city dwellers, and regardless of ethnic or linguistic background. This unity would be a major factor in the success of the spread of Islam. Many were also attracted by the prospect of financial gain that came with military success. Goods seized from non-believers were to be kept by the faithful, said Muhammad, and those who converted to Islam soonest were rewarded with a greater share of the prizes. Small-scale raids soon turned into ambitious attacks on towns, and it wasn't long before cities and whole regions were captured by Arab armies that fanned out in all directions. The importance of the Arabian Peninsula was preserved by the declaration that those praying should face the Kaaba, a sacred shrine said to have been set up in Mecca by Abraham and his son Ishmael. Mecca became, and remains to this day, the focal point of prayer and pilgrimage for all Muslims. By the time of Muhammad's death in the 630s AD, Arab armies were on the march, conquering all before them. The great cities of the Sasanian and Roman empires, including Damascus, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, fell in a spectacular series of military successes. The new Arab overlords kept their distance, building camps and settlements for themselves and leaving the local rulers and officials in place to run the administration. Taxes would also be collected in order to pay the new overlords. Christians and Jews were singled out in the Quran as people of the book, referring to the Old Testament, a holy book for both groups, and as having nothing to regret or fear. And so early Muslim leaders not only allowed churches and synagogues to be built in areas that they conquered, but in some cases even helped pay for them. The fact that the Quran talks of the importance of figures like Abraham, Isaac, Moses, and Noah help bond the different belief systems rather than divide them. So too did other statements, such as those written on the exterior walls of the great mosque of Damascus, which note how Jesus, son of Mary, was God's envoy, and that the days he was born, died, and rose again should be considered blessed. In time, however, attitudes changed. Hardline rulers, influenced by powerful advisors, began to treat those who were not Muslim less leniently. Toleration gave way to persecution and suffering. Pressure to convert the population to Islam rose, with some canny figures offering silver coins to anyone who turned up at the mosque for Friday prayers. Part of the reason for these growing efforts to convert others came from the fact that Muslims fought against each other with increasing bitterness. The stakes rose as rivals struggled to prove that they were the most faithful guardians of the messages that had been passed by God. These rivalries solidified into two competing arguments. Those who became known as Shia, who argued that only the descendant of Ali, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, should rule as caliph, a Muslim ruler, and the Sunni, who took a much broader view about who should be the supreme ruler. The division between the two groups was bitter and often violent. 3 of the first 4 men to be appointed as successor to Muhammad were assassinated. To this day, rivalry between Sunni and Shia beliefs is a source of tension in the Muslim world. Meanwhile, as the Arab armies conquered vast territories in the 7th and 8th centuries, stretching from the Pyrenees and Spain across North Africa, the whole of the Middle East as far as the Himalayas, a new world order was created. It was a world that united the richest, most productive, most sophisticated parts of the Roman Mediterranean with those of the old Persian Empire. A new superpower emerged, spanning 3 continents. Cities prospered and flourished as peace and stability finally returned. Although there were still periods of competition between Muslims, and even sometimes violent persecution of those who did not follow Islam, a new world had emerged, one that was self-confident, broad-minded, and passionate about progress. Immensely wealthy, with few natural political or even religious rivals, this was a place where order prevailed, where merchants could become rich, where intellectuals were respected, and opposing views could be discussed. An unpromising start in a cave near Mecca had given birth to something like a cosmopolitan utopia, which is an ideal society, full of people from many different countries and cultures. It marked the start of a golden age for scholars, traders, and travellers. The wealth and sophistication did not go unnoticed. Those with ambition, born on the edges of the Muslim world and far beyond, were drawn to it like bees to honey. And it seemed to those in China, South Asia, and even further afield, that there were possibilities that looked irresistible.